Welcome to Parkside at Home, everybody. My name is Callie.
And my name is Matt, and I'm very excited that you're joining us here online, especially if it's your first time. Welcome. We would love to have an opportunity to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, and the easiest way to do that is by going to parkside.life/connect. There you can fill out just a little bit of your information, and one of us will get in touch with you just to learn more about who you are and answer any questions that you may have about Parkside. We know that life can be a lot at times, and navigating things like work, family, and finances can be a big weight to carry. Yeah, it's a lot going on. And so that is the reason that we are here, is to provide an opportunity for you to learn more about who Jesus is and what it looks like to live in relationship with him.
Yeah, no matter where you're watching from today or what's going on in your life, we believe that God has brought you here for a reason, and he has something to share with you today.
We really encourage you to lean in and hear from God. Listen to what he may be speaking to you, and even ask him how you can apply his truth and what you hear from today's message to your life today.
I want to remind you as well that you're not alone. We're here for you. That's the whole point of community. So we would love to have an opportunity to connect with you, to pray with you, to talk through some stuff so that you can know more and more what it is that God is doing in your life.
One of the best ways to deepen your faith and even get connected in community is through groups. Groups is a great space to build community and ask the hard questions about life and faith.
Yeah, so our groups meet weekly, twice a month. There's a little bit of variation there, but they're super, super simple. It's all about getting together, doing life together, asking the tough questions, sharing some meals, just hanging out. If you want to know more about the groups that we offer and what they do, head over to parkside.life/groups.
Before we head into the message, we just want to take the time to say thank you so much for your generosity. It is how you give each and every week that makes the world of a difference, and it means so much to us.
Yeah, it's through your faithful giving and partnership that we really are able to build bridges between people and Jesus, and you are a part of that. So if you want to, head over to parkside.life/give. It's a safe and secure way to continue in your worship in that way.
So we are going to head into the message. It is our first week of a new series called Devoted.
Yeah, it's going to be all about spiritual disciplines and what it means to live this life to the fullest in the ways that God has asked us to.
We would love to know that you're here, so like this video, maybe even comment something that you learned from today's message. We'll see you soon.
Well, I told you about us sending kids to church camp, and I'm really excited about that. They're going to NTS camp down at Southern Wesleyan this summer. It's going to be a fantastic time. I'm really excited, and it just kind of reignited this truth in my life. And this truth is, and you've heard me talk about it before, I love camp. I love going to church camp as a kid. I mean, every summer from as far back as I could remember, my year was based around how quickly can I get to June or July, whenever camp was, and let me get to camp. And then when I was a youth pastor, everything was about, if we can just get kids to camp, it's going to be a great experience. I structured so much of my life around summer camp, it's a little bit embarrassing. In fact, one of the things I have lamented transitioning into this role, which I'm super thankful for, wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But one of the things I have missed is going to camp in the summer. If I could go back and speak at a camp, I would do that every summer because it's the easiest job in the world because you have all the fun and none of the responsibility. But I also just love being at camp. I mean, it's some of the most important things that have happened in my life have happened at camp. In fact, I've got this picture that represents a lot of different things for me. If you want to take a look at it, it should be on the screen behind me now. I'll just see if it worked. I don't know if it worked. Is it there now? Awesome. All right. This picture is one of my favorite pictures of Annabeth, and she's super embarrassed right now, but that's the problem with being a pastor's kids is sometimes you get your parents embarrass you, and both of her parents are pastors, so she's just got a double whammy. But this picture represents a lot of different things for me. First of all, it represents a physical location. Some of you recognize, this is Table Rock Wesleyan Camp, where I grew up going to camp. And it represents a location where God has moved in my life in big, big ways. That's where I met Jesus for the first time. It's where I met Deborah, even though I don't remember it. I know that's where we met, right? That's a story for a different time. That's where we fell in love. I could take you to the spot on the porch swing where we fell in love. I could tell you the story about how Jason tried to sabotage it, but that's a whole different story for another time, right? And it's also, in my mind, Annabeth wouldn't be here without Table Rock. Like all these important things that happen in my life wouldn't be here. So it represents a physical location where God has moved in my life in mighty ways. It represents the beauty of creation. Like, I don't know if you can see it. There's that building in the back. On the other side of that building, it's in a completely glass wall. So you're sitting facing the stage, and Table Rock and all this beauty is right there. So, like, how could you not experience God in that space? And those of you like who've been there, you're shaking your head because you know it's incredibly beautiful. And it's where I began this love for nature and being in nature as an easy way for me to worship God. I love worship here in this space. Like today, it was on point. Like, you guys did a great job. But for me, like if I need to just find clarity with the Lord and simplicity and just the purest form of worship, I'm outside. Just a few weeks ago, like I'll be honest, I was in a bad headspace and I just needed to get away, and this is where I went. Whole day by myself in solitude, just me and some trail mix and a waterfall. And I met Jesus there. But then also, this picture also represents, my family and my life as a father and some of the purpose. Obviously Annabeth's in this picture, and this is the first time she ever got to come because Annabeth was born in Indiana. She's a Hoosier, not quite a Yankee, but she's more Southern than not, but right? But this is the first time she got a chance to go, and for me, it was a culmination of God's movement in my life, and so this picture kind of represents his goodness to me, and not only his goodness, but purpose. So when I say I love going to church camp, like it means an awful lot to me. But I often think back at those times where I would go to camp and then come home and these weird things would happen. Like I would have this, what we call a mountaintop experience with God where like I would feel him move. I was in an environment where like I really felt connected with the worship, right? And I love my home church, right? But like the worship there on Sunday mornings didn't really connect with me as a middle school, high school boy, right? But when I went to camp, it was something different, right? It was an environment that was built for where I was in my relationship with God, and so I felt connected to God in a different way. And I would hear from these speakers that I admired, and I felt like they were speaking directly to me, and I just felt God move. And I would come home from those camps, and I was like, yes. Let's get after it. Let's go. Like whatever. Is that picture still up there? You can get rid of that, Amy. Annabeth is really distracting me right now. She's like, go away. But anyways, I would come home from this experience just on a high. And I remember thinking like, whatever, like insert the blank of whatever sin I was dealing with at the moment, I'm never doing that again. Because God did something in my life. And I was on this high, right? We called it the camp high. And I don't know if we should call it that, but that's what we did. And I don't know if you grew up in those environments, going to conferences or camps, and you would come back just so excited, and you felt like nothing could touch you spiritually. And then what happened about 14 days later? You would just drop off because you would get back to reality. And one of the great things about camp, like you were disconnected from the world. And look, back in the mid-90s, way back in the day when I was going to camp, like, we didn't have phones. There was no Wi-Fi at the camp because it really didn't exist, right? Like, we were completely disconnected from the world. Like, some war could have broken out in another country, and we wouldn't know till we came back home. We just didn't know what was going on in the world. And it's not like, there was a payphone there because I am that old. Like, we didn't call home. We were secluded, sequestered from the world for those 5 or 6 days. And so it was really easy to feel just like you were alone with your friends and God. But then reality would set back in when you come home and like your troubles with your family, the troubles with your friends or whatever was going on in your life, like those came back and the high would fade. But I remember this one particular camp. It was my either sophomore or freshman year. It was after one of those. I can't remember exactly which one because they blur together after a while. I remember sitting on the front steps of wherever we were living at the time, and it's kind of vague, but I remember processing that reality, processing like, I've been home from camp for a couple days. I'm still feeling that camp high, but I was tired of going back and forth, that spiritual and emotional whiplash, because it got to the point where it was like 3 or 4 months before camp when I was really struggling. It was like, if I could just make it to camp, then God's going to move and I'm going to be okay. And like, I disconnected the reality of like, I didn't have to be at Table Rock Wesleyan Camp crying at the altar to experience God. I could experience God wherever I was at, and it didn't always have to be an emotional response. It could just be this very logical, this very intellectual, this very concrete thing that could happen at any moment. But I remember in this moment, sitting on the porch, and I didn't want to feel different. I wanted to make the choice to be different. Does that make sense? Like, I didn't want to just feel the way that I felt. I realized that the expectation that I always feel like that in every moment in between camps was unrealistic and even unhealthy. I needed to stop chasing the camp high and actually needed to become devoted to Jesus Christ. And over the years, the gospel has changed my life, and I want to continue to choose to live my life to reflect that change. Not just an emotional response, not out of religious obligation, but a desire to honor Jesus. Like I said, this was the moment where I started to take my faith seriously, where it actually meant something more than just an emotional connection to me. It's the day I chose devotion to Jesus. Years after I got saved, years after I got called into ministry even, this was something different. That's more than 25 years ago. That's a long time ago. As I think about that time and things that have happened since then, look, it's been a bumpy ride. There have been a lot of moments that I feel like I've gone back on some things that I've committed to. There are moments where I've experienced those camp high type moments over and over again. But I can't look back at that moment and say, that's when things changed. That's the moment that I felt like God was the most real to me, and it stayed the same ever since. Not that choosing to be devoted to Jesus meant that I didn't return to some habits, that I stayed on the mountaintop. Of course not. Even to say it out loud just sounds ludicrous because life happens. And look, I've made plenty of mistakes, and many of you have witnessed me make some of those mistakes. And so sometimes I wonder why you're still here, but I'm thankful that you are. But even within that, I have become a different person. I changed as a person that day after that experience. And over the years, I've learned something that I think it's important for you to consider as we respond to how the gospel has changed your life. As we kind of come out of, the gospel changes everything. We're starting a new series, and all these things, they run together. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but throughout this entire year, we've tried to stack things and concepts and content on top of one another in order to develop you as a disciple. I hope you're paying attention. But to move from just a re-understanding and a reconnection to the fact that gospel has changed our life. Okay, how do we respond to that? We lean into devotion. We lean into being devoted to Jesus. But as I've learned this, I want to share it with you, and here it is. Devotion to Jesus requires discipline. I think it's interesting on a morning where, I don't know about you, but like I felt something different in worship this morning. I felt a connection, a different level of intensity. Like I felt different. I can't explain it. I think it's interesting on that morning where I felt more stirred than maybe I normally do. I'm being reminded and reminding you that there is a disciplined element to faith. We talked about this a little bit last week. There's absolutely an emotional element to our faith. Absolutely 100%. If you don't think about what Jesus has done for your life and it doesn't stir something up, right? Maybe there's some things that are dormant. Maybe you should go back and really ponder those things. We should have some kind of stirring in our soul when we think about the gospel and how it's changed our life, the effect of grace in our life. But we also know that feelings are fleeting and they can't always be trusted. Our emotions betray us. No matter how emotionally mature we are, no matter how emotionally intelligent we are, our emotions betray us from time to time. They're a part of our faith, but they can't rule our faith. But our devotion must be anchored to something that goes much deeper than our feelings. It's got to be anchored on something much deeper than our moment-to-moment camp high days and weeks. Anchored to something deep. And discipline is what digs the deepest roots. I mean, basically what I'm telling you here today, and we're going to dive into it together, what I'm telling you is that from a discipleship standpoint, you will go further, faster with God. You will grow deeper and stronger through discipline than through emotional responses. You will grow farther and faster through discipline than you all will in moments. They work together. We need to have both, but we like to lean into the emotional side, the feeling side, because it feels good. To raise our hands and worship, to feel the presence of God, right? To feel that in community when people pray for us and they encourage us. Like, that's great. That's awesome. We need those things. But we can't live off those things. We've got to dig into discipline. Devotion to Jesus requires discipline. There's a passage in Paul's first letter to Timothy that's really interesting to consider in light of the issue of discipline and devotion. And we're going to dive into it together. And just to give you a little bit of context, Paul's first letter to Timothy was to encourage and instruct Timothy as he provided leadership and correction to the church in Ephesus that strayed away from Paul's teaching over time. So Paul writes this letter, hey, Timothy, here's what you need to know. Here's the way that you should lead. Here's the things that you should teach to this church that has gotten a little bit off to the left or to the right, whatever you want to look at it. And in this teaching, or in this letter, he gives them this task that was of a spiritual nature and practical application. Exactly what a relationship with Jesus is like. That's why we're looking at this scripture together. Because it was spiritual in nature, but also practical in application. Because that's exactly how our relationship with Jesus is. It's spiritual in nature, practical in application. And there's some parallels we can draw from this passage. So let's read it together and then we'll unpack it. It's a few verses, so hang in there with me. Here we go. Starting with verse 7. Have nothing to do with godless myths or old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things. All of us who need to do more physical training just said amen and amen. Holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. This is why we labor and strive, because we have put our hope in the living God, who is the Savior of all people, and especially of those who believe. Do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for all believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture and to the preaching and to teaching. Do not neglect your gift, which was given to you through prophecy when the body of elders laid their hands on you. Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. Command and teach these things. 9 verses that are packed full of instructions from Paul to Timothy, but they are also instructions for us to live a devoted life to Jesus. 9 verses that are chock full of all kind of information. I want to break down some of the things that I want you to pay attention to. It's a lot. We're going to put them on the screen, and maybe you can take a picture. I'm just going to read through them, some bullet points. This is the way I want to look at it. First of all, have nothing to do with godless myths or old wives' tales. That some of you who are stitious or a little or superstitious, that's what you need to pay attention to. Have nothing to do with godless myths or old wives' tales. Train yourselves to be godly. Don't let anyone look down on you. Set an example. Devote yourself to preaching and teaching. Do not neglect your gift. Be diligent. Give yourself wholly. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere. Command and teach these things. So in 9 verses, Paul gave 11 instructions to Paul, or Paul gave 11 instructions to Timothy, and now God has given them to us. Just in a few verses. I mean, it's a lot. It's a bullet point of do this, don't do that. And I know we talk about how weird that can be in Christian faith and how we've moved from the letter of the law to the spirit of the law. And I don't want to get bogged down. I don't want you to think like we're getting ready to preach through all these things. I think there's an overarching understanding that we need to have. Like when I look at this list, do you know what I see? I see discipline. What Paul is trying to communicate to Timothy, that if you're going to lead this church through correction back to a gospel-centered reality, you have to be disciplined. You have to teach them discipline. Conceptually, this passage and many other teaches us that devotion requires discipline. It's inescapable. We can't get away from it. But the good news is this scripture, especially when looking at it through the lens of the life of Christ, gives us some practical examples of spiritual disciplines that will help us develop our devotion to Jesus. And over the next few weeks, that's actually what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about spiritual disciplines in our lives that help us from a practical standpoint, give us a platform and give us focus to develop our discipleship, to become more devoted to Jesus. And this time is designed to help you dig deep so you have something rock solid to anchor that devotion to. It's not going to be emotional. It's not going to be fleeting. It's going to be based on something real that you can put your hands on. But before we dive in over that for the next several weeks, I wanted to lay the groundwork. I wanted you to understand, like, it's one thing for us to talk about spiritual disciplines and how important they are, and we're going to do that. But if we don't understand, like, the reason those things are important is because devotion to Jesus requires discipline, then it really doesn't matter. What you're going to hear is, I got to add something else to my to-do list. Over the next 6-7 weeks, however long we're in this series, you're just going to add things to my to-do list. No, that's not what we're trying to do, because I know you're all busy. We're all busy. We've all got a ton of stuff going on. And I'm not trying to add tasks to your spiritual list. I'm trying to help you grow in your discipleship. And you can't grow in your discipleship without discipline. I want to remind you that devotion requires discipline, and also talk about the impact that creating that space for spiritual disciplines can have in your life. So now we've kind of laid the groundwork. Let's talk about the impact that it can have. Let's talk about the why. Like, why are we having these conversations? Why are they important? What kind of impact can having spiritual disciplines have on our devotion to Jesus? Well, that's a big question. In fact, I think we could answer that question in 1,000 different ways. And we're only going to discuss 900 of them now. I'm just kidding. I do want to drill down on two basic concepts, two basic questions. And they're based on common questions that I've been asked as a pastor throughout my entire career. In fact, there's two questions that I get asked in some way or another in almost every discipleship conversation. And what's really interesting about these two questions is that I've been asked them by, like, middle school kids who are just trying to figure out, like, the very beginning of their faith, all the way up to people who are in a later season, even maybe the last season of their life. I don't think these are circumstantial based on place in life or circumstances. I just think these are things that all of us have to navigate at some point. So here's the first one. How do I grow my faith? How do I grow my faith? I know that my relationship with God needs to grow. I know that my discipleship needs to go to the next level. I know that my faith needs to become something different and more than it is now. How do I actually do this? We could get into why, but I don't know that it really matters for this conversation. But I feel like a lot of us, we accept Christ, we get all excited, and then it's like, what's next? Like, we understand the basics of, I need Jesus in my life, and I can't do or be the things that I need to be in this life or the next apart from him. And we accept that, but then we're like, just start going to church? Like, is that it? Am I just supposed to be a part of a club that meets on Sunday mornings? Right? How do I grow my faith? But I think Paul's words to Timothy help give understanding to live in this life, not just moments with Christ. Verse 8, he says, for physical training is of value to some, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for those, or for the present life and the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. This is why we labor and strive, because we have not put our hope because we have put our hope in the living God, who is the Savior of all people, especially for those who believe. When I consider these words, when I consider this passage, this is what I see. Spiritual disciplines grow our faith and help it become tactile. It gives us something to put our hands on. When we talk about faith, it is such a nebulous concept. Like, its very definition lends itself to that. It's the hope in what we cannot see. And all people, to some degree, are visual people. Like, the things that make the most sense to us are the things that we can put right in front of our face. And our faith is really difficult to put right in front of our face. But spiritual disciplines are something that ground us in real life, something we can kind of put on our calendar or put our hands around or put our understanding around. If you're in a season where you're feeling led to deepen your faith, and I hope you all are, in a season where you're being called to grow closer to God, these next week are for you 100%. Don't miss a week. If you have to miss a week, it'll be online. Don't miss any of the content, because if you're looking, I know that I need to grow closer to Jesus, but I'm not sure exactly how to do it. These next few weeks are going to give you so many resources and so many examples of how you can practically dive deeper with Jesus. We're going to walk through some really practical examples of practices that you can incorporate in your life that will help you develop that faith and help it become more real, more tactile, something you could put your hands on. Things that you can do where you're going to feel the presence of God in between Sunday mornings. That was the first question. That was a good one, right? Thanks for the affirmation. I appreciate it. I've also had people ask me, how do I hear from the Holy Spirit? Or how do I hear from God? That's a really important but tough question for a lot of reasons. One, God speaks to us in many different ways. He speaks to us as individuals, like I hear from God through nature. I hear from God through opportunity. Like one of the ways that I vet the moving of the Holy Spirit in my life is I just walk. I just keep going. And I've learned how to hear God saying yes or no or go this way through experience. Some people, right, they hear from God by just sitting and waiting for the Lord. And they won't move until he says move. Is either of those right or wrong? No, God speaks to me in a way that he knows, because he knows if I'm just sitting still, my ADD is going to start kicking off and I can't pay attention to nothing. And some people, they need solitude and silence to feel like they hear from God. There's nothing wrong with either of those. He understands us as individuals. But I think at some point we have all sought clarity and wisdom from God, and we have a hard time understanding how we get to that. Again, Paul speaks to discipline playing a role in our ability and availability to spiritual matters in a couple of different places in this passage. And we're going to skip from verse 17 down to verse 7 down to verse 16. It'll be on the screen, so you don't have to worry about it. Have nothing to do with godless myths or old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. Train yourself. Watch, and then verse 16, watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. Paul tells Timothy to avoid myths and superstitions, to watch his belief closely through discipline, because it will restrict the Holy Spirit's movement in Timothy's life. The reason he says these things, his instructions is hey, look, if you want to help the ability to hear the Holy Spirit, don't restrict his movement. And don't restrict his movement by paying attention to things in this world that have nothing to do with him. Godless myths and old wives' tales, and you got to watch your doctrine closely. What you believe matters. When we start believing things that are outside of what God teaches, it restricts the movement of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And sometimes the only way that we can have sound doctrine and theology in our life is through the discipline of study. We need to pay attention. We can't just lean into the experiential moments of what it means to be in faith. We can't just lean into the community moments that make us feel good. Sometimes we need to sit down. We need to open the Word of God and listen to what He's saying. Sometimes we need to ask good, hard questions. You may be asking, God, why aren't you speaking to me? Why can't I feel your presence in my life? Why do I have to be in these certain settings? Or why, when I'm in those settings, I can look around and see that people feel your presence, but I feel nothing. I'm dry. What if the problem isn't him speaking or moving? What if your heart and soul and mind are so cluttered with the things in your life that's making it impossible for you to hear him? We ask, God, why aren't you moving? I just don't feel your presence. Why aren't you speaking? I don't feel like I have a sense of your presence in my life. And we look at him and say, where are you? Where are you? And he's like, I'm right here. But you've stacked so much stuff up that doesn't matter. You can't see me. God is omnipotent. He is ever present in your life. So many times, he's just sitting there waiting for you. All you got to do is turn around. He's never left, not once. He is always there. But you got to get the stuff out of the way. Maybe it's time for a little spring cleaning. Maybe that's what the next few weeks are about. Maybe you need to go through the discipline of whatever we're getting ready to talk about, and that's going to help move some stuff out of your life, some of that clutter. Not that all your problems are going to go away. If we ever promise you that we're going to do something here that's going to make all your problems go away, we've just lied to you. And that's bad. But we do believe there are some things that we can do, incorporate into our lives that can help declutter some things and get some distractions out of the way so we can see the fullness of God in our life at every moment. The spiritual disciplines that we're talking about over the next few weeks are the supplies that you'll need to declutter. We're going to go into the old broom closet. We're going to get out the 409 or the Scotch pads, broom, and the dust mop, all that kind of stuff. And we're just going to get rid of some stuff. We're going to declutter your mind by learning how to dive into scripture together. We're going to clean out the corners of your spirituality, like downward where you think nobody sees what we all see. We're going to get that with talking about solitude. We may talk about solitude. I'm not preaching every week. So I don't want to assign things to people where God may be leading. But I'm excited about this because, look, I'll be straight with you. This first half of 2023 for me personally has been difficult. There are moments where I'm journaling and like, Lord, like I'm doing this because I'm supposed to, but man, I feel dry. Moments where I look and say, man, I haven't done my Bible reading but twice this week, and I'm supposed to do it every day. Lord, I'm sorry. And like I said, it got so bad February, March, where like I had to disconnect from everything and everyone for a day. And I know that the reason why that is, it's not because God wasn't present, he wasn't moving, he wasn't speaking in my life. It's because I let some stuff get in the way. And I would love to say, like, just going up to Table Rock and having a moment with him was enough. And it was great. But guess what happened when I drove back to Greenville? My problems were still there. They were still there. It's time for some spring cleaning. Over the last few minutes, we've done the work to unpack the reality of being devoted to Jesus and that requiring discipline. Hopefully, if you've been paying attention, like, you've got some understanding of what that looks like. We have a better understanding of the impact that practicing spiritual disciplines can have on a life that's devoted to Jesus. We're going to grow our faith. We're going to be able to hear from the Holy Spirit. Let's dive in together. Let's make the commitment right here and right now that over the next few weeks, we're going to open ourselves up to how we can hear from God through discipline, through spiritual disciplines, to see how God will use your discipline to help you connect and cooperate with the Holy Spirit. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much for the diversity of how you connect with us. That you have an understanding that we are multifaceted, complicated beings. You created us this way. And we are created in your image. Like, you are not just one thing. You are layered and nuanced and complicated and beautiful and messy. And so are we. So while we have moments like this where we can sing to you and feel your presence from an emotional standpoint, also thankful for those times where we just have to lean in to do the hard work and how you move just as much in those ways. But sometimes we have a hard time with that because it requires more of us. And Lord, let us not forget that the thing you actually require from us is everything. Sometimes we don't like to talk about this in these settings because it makes us feel uncomfortable. We're living in a world where we want to give as little as possible out there. We want to protect ourselves. And we feel like the best thing that we can do to protect ourselves is to keep ourselves safe. But when it comes to you, you actually do something that's counterintuitive to that. You're like, actually, if you give me everything, if you lay it all on the line, if you don't hide any corner from me, if nothing about your life is not on the altar, like if you give me everything, you will have the most purpose-driven, fulfilling, beautiful life than you can ever have. And I think for a lot of us, the next step in that is to decide, because that's what it is, decide to be disciplined in our devotion to you. We love you, Lord. But I want that to be less just about saying the words and more about showing you our love. As we sing this morning, help these things sink deep in our hearts. We love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
We are so glad that you were able to join us today. No matter where you are watching from, we consider you a part of the family. So we would love to get connected with you. You can go to parkside.life/connect to fill out that connection card, or you can just message us on social media through Instagram or Facebook or even on our website. We would just really love to get to know you and help you out with any questions that you may have. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you again soon.